Why did Jesus not want it known that he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Mark chapter 5. We're going to be reading from verses 35 to 43. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 5, beginning at verse 35. While he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and saw a tumult, and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. And when he had put them all outside, he took the father and mother of the child, and those who were with him, and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand, and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given to her to eat. With today's reading, we conclude the story that we began in the last episode. If you recall, the story began with Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue, coming to Jesus, wanting his daughter, who was near death, to be healed. Due to the man's faith, Jesus agreed to come. Along the way, with the multitudes following, a woman with an issue of blood for 12 years touched the hem of his garment and was healed. After asking for the person who touched him to come forward, he comforted the woman, saying that she was to go in peace, for her faith had made her whole. Coming now to verse 35, people came from Jairus' house to tell him not to trouble the teacher any longer, for his daughter was dead. Skeptics want to accuse Mark and Matthew of a contradiction here, for Matthew says that when Jairus came to Jesus, he told Jesus that his daughter had just died, while here in Mark, he doesn't find out until along the way. Remember what Mark tells us in verse 23, that Jairus told Jesus that his daughter was at the point of death. So with death being so imminent, when Matthew tells us that Jairus told Jesus that his daughter had just died, that was an accurate statement, for that is likely what Jairus believed, even if it hadn't been confirmed until along the way. Jesus was willing to continue on to Jairus' house, so he told Jairus not to be afraid, only believe. What we have in verses 37 to 43 is an expansion of what Matthew told us in his account. From reading Matthew and Mark's account of this story, it seems like Matthew, even though he told us both stories, really used Jairus' story in order to introduce the story of the woman, while Mark focuses on both stories, but especially the story of Jairus. That would provide us an explanation as to why Matthew omits so much about the story of Jairus, details that Mark includes. Once Jesus heard about the girl's death, he only allows Peter, James, and John to follow him to the house. Mark makes it unclear, but Luke would tell us that Jesus made this demand when he arrived at Jairus' house, which would make sense since Jairus' house certainly could not fit all of Jesus' disciples and some of the multitude. Jesus thus allowed some of his closest disciples to witness this event. When Jesus came into the house, he found mourners present. Jesus asked them why they wept, for the girl wasn't dead. She was just sleeping. Now we might ask the question, was the girl actually dead? Yes, I believe she was, but to Jesus she was not, because of what he was going to do next. Those who were there obviously thought Jesus was being insensitive, so they ridiculed him for this statement. Jesus wasn't going to give these scorners the opportunity to witness this miracle, so he sent them outside and took the girl's mother and father along with Peter, James, and John and went into the room where the girl was. Jesus took the child by the hand and told her to arise. Immediately the child arose and walked. Mark tells us that the child was 12 years old in order to explain to us why she could walk, for the use of the word child could have meant someone much younger. Not only then had Jesus raised this girl from the dead, but when she arose, she was cured of the disease that had caused her to die in the first place. This is the first instance in Mark of Jesus raising someone from the dead. It's not something he did often, but he did it here because of Jairus' faith and in order to show his power. Mark is presenting to us proof that Jesus is the Son of God. Teaching with authority is thus proof. Having the power over diseases and demons is proof. And having the power over death is also proof. We do not read of many prophets being given the power to raise the dead. So when you combine all of these things together, we can conclude that Jesus isn't merely a prophet like other prophets, but he is God himself. Jesus told the family to provide the girl some food, for she must be hungry, but also to not tell anyone that the girl was raised from the dead. Up to that point, only a select few had known that the girl had died, so it was not necessary to tell everyone that Jesus raised her from the dead. I'm sure this was said because Jesus didn't want people to come to him to have their relatives raised from the dead, as they had come to him to have their diseases healed when it was published that Jesus could perform miracles. Jesus had a purpose in coming to earth, and raising everyone from the dead was not one of those purposes, so his request is quite reasonable. With that, our time is up for today, Lord willing. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 6, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.